Secretary Pompeo, let me ask you first this. It's shocking everybody this morning because Vice President Harris is finally at the southern border right now. There's a lot of questions about the location that was chosen as kind of a place to check the box because it's a much more kind of a processing center, much more secure. It's not like what's going on in the Rio Grande where we see, but the numbers continue to rise. I mean, we're at 180,000. These are 20-year highs for just the month of May. Since they've come into office, it's over 700,000 encounters. I want to ask you about that in a minute. But first of all, it's a 2-hour visit, Secretary Pompeo, to one spot. So she's not going to multiple spots to see the differences and see how one area may be handling it. The other areas kind of, feels like they've got not enough staff, not enough resources. Do you honestly think that anything will come out of this visit, or was this we better check this box before President Trump heads down?
Well, Jordan, I can't imagine that tomorrow there'll be fewer people come across than today, or that today there'll be fewer people come across than came across yesterday as a result of her trip down to the border. It doesn't appear to be a particularly serious effort. It looks like she's going down there just to complete a task that's been on her to-do list for an awfully long time, and she caught flack for handling this poorly. Sadly, we focus so much on her travel down there. I'd happy if she doesn't travel down there, if she could actually address the crisis at our southern border, if they could actually fix it, if their actions actually delivered in the way that we did for 4 years in the Trump administration. Right? It took us a little while to get it right, but we had this issue in a place where we understood who was coming across our border. We had clarity about what was going to happen, and I think people all across Central America and Mexico and the world knew that our southern border was closed, that there was lawful immigration, but if you tried to get here illegally, we were going to stop you. We wouldn't do catch and release. We wouldn't play any silly games. If you applied for asylum, you were going to stay in Mexico. Those are the things that matter. And for Vice President Harris to go down there and have some video taken of her at a processing center today, I can't imagine this is going to convince anyone thinking about coming across our border illegally to change their plans.
So, with the policies, and that's really the focus, Secretary Pompeo, is that there were policies in place when the Trump administration came in. Things were not good at the border. That was acknowledged by the president while he ran for office in his first campaign, and he talked about the border a lot and securing the border, building the wall. In fact, when she's in El Paso, you can see portions of that wall when they flew in, and you can see where it was finished and why maybe this is a calmer location. But the idea is that, with all the policy changes made, do you think it matters really who is tasked in this administration with this duty if they won't get realistic with about the actual policies that work and stop playing politics with policy?
No, Jordan, it doesn't make a darn who he tasks. In the end, it's President Biden's responsibility. He's the commander-in-chief. He has the responsibility to secure our southern border. It is his statutory duty, his legal duty, and it's the right thing to do. And so you can, in the military, we would always talk about the fact that you can delegate authority but not responsibility. Yeah. In the end, this all falls on President Biden. He's got to get it right. I hear them talk too, Jordan, about how our policies were bad. Look at what's happening to these people that are trying to make their way across. Look at the horrors that are being inflicted upon them by these cartels and these coyotes. This is truly a humanitarian crisis, wholly apart and separate from the crisis it presents to our southern border.
We get this word a lot, Secretary Pompeo. I know some other guys from our team have got questions for you, but this term encounters is used a lot. So we heard that there's 180,000 Border Patrol encounters in the month of May. How should we all interpret that? Because does that just mean that people were taken and released? Does it? It certainly doesn't imply that they were all turned back. So it just seems like a word that's specially chosen by so that it's vague enough where you can't actually define what it means, even when you were able to stop someone.
Jordan, I think that's exactly right. I think when the Biden administration uses this term encounter, that just means that they came across someone. We know when we came into office that there was this policy of catch and release. Take their name, take their number, tell them Godspeed. I actually think this administration is handling it even worse than this. I think when they're having encounters, they're actually taking them into custody and then moving them throughout the country, giving them the capacity to be here and remain here, even if in an ambiguous status. We know that many of these folks will ultimately come to live here long term, and they'll do so in a way that was inconsistent with U.S. law. So My guess is, Jordan, your fears or your concerns about them using this word encounter are entirely justified.
Mr. Secretary, let me turn your attention for just a minute to the JCPOA. Under Benjamin Netanyahu, the former Israeli prime minister, Israel refused to engage with the Biden administration over the Iran nuclear deal, except to strongly oppose it. But the new prime minister, Naftali Bennett, is taking a somewhat different approach by at least appearing to be working with President Biden behind closed doors. Netanyahu has said that Bennett isn't strong enough to stand up to Biden over the JCPOA. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't want to quibble with the new prime minister about his tactics. In the end, the United States has to do everything that it can to ensure that the Iranians never get a nuclear weapon. And going back into this nuclear deal is just crazy. I hope that this is what Prime Minister Bennett is telling President Biden. I hope what he is saying, if they're talking, is that this will risk Israel's security situation. It will risk stability in the region. It'll create the chance that other countries in the region will decide they need nuclear weapons. And the Prime Minister should be saying very clearly, we will never let Iran have a nuclear weapon. It's too dangerous for the Jewish homeland. And you are putting us in a difficult position that one day we may have to do the most difficult thing Israel could do, which is to go be in a position where they had to go take out an Iranian nuclear program. We ought not put the Israelis in that position. We have the capacity to prevent that. And sadly, this is muscle memory for President Biden and his team, the same people who created instability in the Middle East by sidling up to the Iranians and giving them tens of billions of dollars in cash, appear to be headed down that same dangerous path again.
I know, Than, you've got a question for Secretary Pompeo as well about his new piece up at aclj.org.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, I wanted to ask you about your latest blog at aclj.org. It's called In Europe Trip, Biden Puts America Last. And I would tell you, Mr. Secretary, I actually feel kind of the same way about the vice president's trip, first to Guatemala and Mexico and then to the United States border. It just seems like she got that backwards. But on Europe specifically and on what you wrote, why do you call this a wasted trip? Do you think there was absolutely no progress made there? Was it just a waste altogether?
I saw nothing that put America as the preeminent interest of his trip, whether he was handing over a pipeline to the Russians and the Germans, or saying that, boy, it's great to be back in the club. I think those were President Macron's words. It was so much about optics, so much about saying that we're back on the team and we're back, rather than saying, no, this is what matters to America. This is how we're going to keep America secure. We want to be your friends and partners. You are great allies. You've got to do your part, but we're going to make sure we get this right. That was a lost opportunity, because if President Biden had gone there and made clear that his mission set was unambiguous to secure American freedom and to build out a set of alliances that could protect us against the Chinese Communist Party and the threats from Iran and the threats from the North Koreans, if he had done those things, he had a chance to do some real good, and he gave up on that for the ability to stand in front of a group of people, our own soldiers, and say that America's greatest national security risk is climate change.
Check out that new piece by Mike Pompeo at aclj.org. It's entitled In Europe Trip, Biden Puts America Last. Secretary Pompeo, it's always great to have you on the ACLJ team.